right, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm here with Charles Browne from Meiji and Gakuin University in Japan. Dr. Browne, who is one of our featured speakers here at Kotesol 2013. We're going to talk about quite a few things, but let's start with the new General Service List. And can you explain a bit about what the new General Service List is?
Okay, well, to talk about the new General Service List, you actually have to begin by talking about the old General Service List. And the old General Service List is a list of core vocabulary words that was created. It's one of the first really big corpus projects. It was done by Michael West in the 1930s and completed in the 1950s. It was done over a span of about 20 or 30 years in the pre-computer era. And what he did was he created it was a hand-collected corpus of about 2.5 million words. And from that 2.5 million words, he figured out what were the 2,000 most important words for second language learners. And those 2,000 words were pretty cool at the time because they represent about 80% of all of the words that you really need to be able to understand a book or a newspaper or a magazine. And so 80% coverage for 2,000 words is pretty cool when you think about the fact that there's about 600,000 words in the English language. So those first 2,000 are really crucial. But the list was criticized for several reasons, one of which is that it's old. So it was published in 1953. So it's a 60-year-old list, and doesn't have words like internet or television or any of the sort of things that are part of our modern lives. And people are always asking, why isn't this there? Why isn't that there? That's one of the problems. But one of the other problems is, again, because it was done in a pre-computer era, the size of the corpus is very, very small by today's standards. And the larger the corpus is, the more accurate. And there are a lot of benefits with working with a larger corpus. So about 3 years ago, I was approached by Cambridge University Press about the idea of writing some textbooks that were vocabulary driven. And I said, okay, well, I'll be glad to do that, but the General Service List really needs to be updated. So what I would be interested in doing is creating a textbook that was vocabulary driven, but was based on an updating of the new General Service List. So let's call it the new General Service List, and let's base it on the Cambridge International Corpus. So the Cambridge Corpus it's entirely digital, and it's about 2 billion words, and compare 2 billion to 2.5 million, which is what the old GSL was. It's an enormous corpus. And what we did is it took us about 2 or 3 years, and Paul Nation was one of our advisors for this project. But what we did is we eventually decided on a 273 million word subsection of the Cambridge corpus, and then used that to try and generate a word list that hopefully would give more coverage than the old GSL with less words. And that's exactly what we did.
So you literally decimated the list, cutting it to 10%.
Well, of course not. We didn't decimate anything, but we're really pleased with the results, because the old GSL was giving about 84% coverage, and
the new one covering?
The new one gives about 90%. And this is 90% is really nice because it's only for 2,800 words, and a lot of the research is showing that 90% is the starting point for where students can comprehend text and read them without the help of a dictionary, and start to be able to guess from context and so on. So this list of 2,800 we think is a really good starting point for second language learners. And then we've created a website, which is www.newgeneralservicelist.org. And on that website, what we've done is we've just started to put every single resource and link and tool that we can think of that might be useful to teachers and researchers and students. So for example, if you go to that website, you can download the list in its headword form, you can download it in its lemmatized form, you can download it with definitions, you can go to another website called Quizlet, which is a free flashcard site, and study the new GSL via online flashcards. There's articles about the list and so on and so forth. So the idea is to just really, get out, create a really, a list that's going to be useful for teachers and students, and then get it out in as many usable forms as possible.
So speaking of tools then, starting with Quizlet, is Quizlet available on both mobile and internet, or how would you access Quizlet?
Well, I think the nice thing about Quizlet, I mean, I think I'm, I don't not have anything to do with that site, but to me from the outside, it looks like a very, very well done site. They started as a regular website, and they had all of the learning tools online, but everything on the website, including all of the code, I think is like public domain. And what's happened is that a lot of other developers from around the world, including some that are Korea based, have actually gone out and made software applications, including iPhone applications and Android applications that port word lists and learning tools from Quizlet right onto mobile devices. So it's a very sort of rich and vibrant community, the Quizlet community, and I thought that was a really good starting point, for the new general service list. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of other tools and other places we're going as well, but it seemed like a no-brainer to go there because it's free, and there's just a lot of different applications that use Quizlet.
You seem to be pretty involved with technology and vocabulary and extensive reading. We talked about the new service list, the new general list. What other projects are you involved with vocabulary and extensive reading?
Well, probably the biggest one that I've been working on for the past couple of years, and this is with my colleague Rob Waring, Dr. Rob Waring from Notre Dame Seishin in Japan also. And this is basically an entire website designed with the main purpose of the website is to promote online extensive reading and extensive listening, and associated with that, extensive reading and extensive listening with vocabulary learning generated from those readings and those listenings. And so it's a free site, and what we're doing is trying to, over the past 2 years, Rob and I have been developing a series of tools and reading content and listening content and links and information on how to run extensive reading, extensive listening, and put this all in one place so that basically anybody, whether you're a teacher or you're a student or you're a publisher or an author, that you'd have one place to go that's just sort of pulling all of those resources together. So we have, we're still in beta launch right now. It's ercentral.com. It's central.com, and the site is still in beta, but there's just a tremendous amount of tools out there that you might be surprised to, if you go over there and look at, because what we've done is, in addition to, I think we have about more than 1,000 stories that you can listen to, almost 1,000 that you can read, and some of them are donated by publishers, some of them are written by us, some of them are written by other authors uploading it. Everything is graded like you would have for an extensive reading or extensive listening library, and there are tools there to help the student to know what their level is, and then to bring them to content that's at their level. And there's an online platform for them to read, to do regular reading, or to do speed reading practice, or to do listening.
So you can self-assess, and you can then actually do a reading test, if you will, and it can
Yes, good point. The test isn't up there yet, but it's in beta. It's like basically we're almost there, but we basically just created a test based on the ERF scale, which is the Extensive Reading Foundation scale, which puts all of the graded readers on one single scale, and that goes up from about 0 to about 4,500 head words. And on our website, we actually thought even 4,500 words was not enough, so we've actually got 20 levels that takes you up to about 18,000 words. So it really covers a wide range of reading and listening materials, and helps you, as if you're an author or a teacher, to grade materials to a specific level, or if you're a student, to find out what your level is and to get access to content at that level.
So you can get access at different levels through your website eventually once it's through beta.
Well, no, you can get access to it right now. Almost everything you have access to, but it's just, it's just not working perfectly yet.
So we talk about how students at the early on stages and with extensive reading, we want them to read sort of an I+1 model, and how they're reading at their band level, and you've mentioned that the first 2,000 words are about 80-90% of the words we use. How important is it to use the low frequency words? So those are the high frequency words. How important is it to learn the lower frequency words?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we don't, I think ER people and vocabulary people tend to really spend a lot of time trying to convince people that they ought to be studying the high frequency words, not the low frequency words, because too many second language learners, unfortunately, because of external forces like entrance exams, they spend too much time memorizing really, really low frequency, difficult words that aren't that helpful when they open up a book or a newspaper or a novel. So these low frequency words that they're memorizing are not that useful in their daily life. And so we tend to push people more towards mastering the core vocabulary first. But once you've mastered that core vocabulary, or when you're trying to work with text, like say you're reading Harry Potter, and 80 or 90%, but there's a whole bunch of really unusual words like kiddish or something like that, and you want to know what those words are. Those are very important, and those are ones that you should be able to look up in a dictionary, and those are ones that you should be able to master. And there are digital tools that including some that are on our site, that help you to identify those words and then to go ahead and learn them. And so there's sort of this symbiosis between extensive reading, where a lot of the vocabulary learning is incidental, and direct study of vocabulary, which it's a very different focus, but they sort of very complementary activities. Direct study of vocabulary via flashcards and games, which is one of the things we have at the ER site, is really fast and it's really efficient, and you can master lots and lots of words very quickly. But the problem and the criticism of that way of learning is that it's decontextualized. It's a flashcard, word on one side and definition and sample sentence on the other. It's not really contextualized. So people criticize it for that. But actually it's a really good way to get receptive knowledge of a word and to get, the core vocabulary learned very quickly. Now on the other side, you have the extensive reading, which is wonderful because you're at I+1 level and it's rich, and you're developing your vocabulary knowledge over time. But the problem is that when you're doing incidental vocabulary learning by graded reading, the vocabulary growth rate is extremely slow. A lot of research is showing that you need to be exposed to words up to somewhere between 15 and 30 times in extensive reading environment before you're actually aware of it and you learn it and you master it. So 30 exposures is a tremendous number, and it takes years to master all the vocabulary if you're doing it only incidentally. So it's really slow. So does that mean it's bad for vocabulary learning? Well, no. It's really good, it's just slow. So if we accept that this is slow, what you do is you go over here and you do some flashcard work. Say you're reading Dracula. That was one of the examples I gave in my seminar today. If you're reading the novel by Bram Stoker, Dracula, it's a very long novel, and there are a lot of words that are very Dracula-like. If you read just the book, you're not going to learn those words because you don't get exposed to them enough time. It's very slow. But if you do a flashcard study really quick over 2 or 3 weeks, you get it receptively, you master it, and then you go over here, and then what happens is, because you've already learned those words, it's contextualized, and getting exposed to these words again and again and again in the book when you already know something about it, the vocabulary growth is enhanced. So I think they're very complementary.
So would you advocate using vocabulary more as a priming strategy and going into the ER? I
don't think there's one answer. I mean, I think that priming, absolutely. A lot of teachers want to pre-teach vocabulary before they go into a difficult text or a difficult novel, and I think that's one way to go. And there are actually a lot of really cool corpus tools that you can use to help you identify those words and then in fact teach those words. So priming is one way to go, but a lot of people say no. Just get into the novel, get into the book, and then as you meet vocabulary that you don't know, the ones that you don't know or that you're interested in or that are relevant to you, at that moment, when they're relevant to you, that's the moment you should study. And so if there's an online clickable HTML dictionary and it pops up just at the moment when you're interested in that word, you're more likely to learn it. So I don't think there's one right answer, but I think what you need to do is to know that there's multiple answers and to prepare. If you assume that from the literature on learning strategies and learner preferences that everybody's wired a little bit differently, then what you have to do is to put as many of those online resources together in one place so that the students can pick and choose the ones that are relevant to them at that moment, that work best for them.
So, a slight tangent for a second. You mentioned a lot of the reading material that's available on there. How is that licensed or available to you? And it's particularly if the websites are free, how are you able to offer that without?
Well, it's this website is what we're trying to do is to create a crowdsourced website. Rob and I, it's been our effort for the past 2 years, and we've written a lot of text. We've actually paid people to write text for us where we would own the rights. But through our connections with the various publishers and friends, we've actually gotten donated text. So several publishers have taken, I forgot what we call them, but like skeleton texts that are out of use, that they're not using anymore. And they've allowed us to upload them to our site. And what we've done is we've created, for every single text on our website, we have a little field which is an attribution field, so that we can say kindly donated by Compass Publishing. And Compass actually donated to us about 200 texts. And so we have some texts that are donated by publishers, some are donated by authors who want people to see their work, some are and we hope that a growing amount of the text will be donated by teachers when they've written or simplified text for their classroom using our tools, that those stories will be uploaded so that other people can use them. And that's the idea of having a crowdsourced, ER community site.
Another slight tangent. You've been in Japan now going on 20 some odd years, right? Yeah. So how do you find, in your Japanese, you can hold your own, so how do you find learning Japanese different from learning English, and what lessons can we learn from how we learn English or how we learn Japanese and cross-disseminate?
Are you asking like how I learn Japanese, and what are some tips on how to learn Japanese well, or like in terms of learning languages?
Yeah, your language learning experience. How do you bring that to ESL, or how can you bring ESL to learning another language?
Well, honestly, I think I came to Japan in 1985, and I'd never been to a foreign country, and I was a literature major, so I came over and I wasn't planning for this career, but I knew that I was going to get a job teaching English, and I had time to take one single class on English education. It was a master's level class, and it was a methodology class. And I remember in 1985, the teacher, I forgot her name, but she introduced me to this book. It was the main book that she used for the course, and it was The Natural Approach by Stephen Krashen. It had just come out. I mean, it was brand new at that time. And I remember reading that book, and it was written in a way that made so much intuitive sense. And I even though I wasn't a linguist at that point in my career, I sort of grasped a lot of those concepts. And when I went to Japan, I thought, not only am I going to try and teach English this way, but I think I'm going to try and learn Japanese this way. And so I really did everything in my power to try and get lots and lots of comprehensible input in Japanese. So that would be like, at that stage, it was like playing with children, because that was the only Japanese I could understand at that point, and working with children's books. And there were a bunch of different strategies I used, but basically this idea of exposing myself to lots and immersing myself in Japanese and trying to understand as much of it as possible, and just having the faith that if I got exposed to it, if there was enough input, that over time, eventually the output would come naturally. And that's the natural approach. You don't force it. You don't force people to speak out. There's a silent period. That was Gatenyo. I can't pronounce his name. But the idea of allowing for a silent period and just getting input. And when you're comfortable, the output will come. And that's what I did with Japanese. And people say my Japanese is very natural. And I think I attribute that to allowing myself enough input and enough time not to force myself forward like that. And I believe in it so much that I found, I don't think that comprehensible input is the only answer, but I think it's a crucial one. I mean, I think that our field has moved very far beyond comprehensible input alone, and I certainly believe in interaction and output and negotiation and all of those other things. I think they're also crucially important. But I think in Japan, the set of language learning problems that Japanese people have, because of the influence of entrance exams, because of the difficulty of Japanese high school textbooks, the government approved ones, which are so far above their level, the importance of comprehensible input on a regular basis to Japanese students it's almost like the cure-all to half the problems. And so my own approach to teaching has always been to make sure that my own English I had very good control of it, that I was able to enunciate, I was able to repeat, I was able to use easy English, and so I'm always gauging my students' ability, whether they're understanding me or not, and shifting, so that it'll be more comprehensible input for them. And that's what brought me in very early on into the extensive reading and extensive listening movement, is that I think what happens in Japan, and I don't know if it's true in Korea, maybe you can tell me, but what happens in Japan far too often is that the Japanese students, at first they love English. Junior high school level, they have lots of confidence, they have lots of motivation, and they love English. You could have them say, okay, stand on your heads, do jumping jacks, and say a pledge of allegiance to the flag, and they do it. Absolutely fearless.
Before the test is given.
And that's what happens after 6 years in junior high and senior high of working with texts that are way above their level, and the teachers focusing on accuracy and error correction and memorization. After 6 years of that, you go to a Japanese high school, and that beautiful motivation they had, it's all gone. That confidence in English, it's all gone. That love of English is turned into hatred of English because it's a subject for memorization. And so for me, when you take those high school level and above students who have lost their motivation and lost their love of English and lost their confidence in English, extensive reading is beautiful. Extensive reading, extensive listening is beautiful, because what happens is when they're in junior high, they try and read a text and it's too hard and they can't. And because they can't, they lose their motivation. If they lose their motivation, they lose their confidence. And it's this horrible negative spiral. And what extensive reading, extensive listening does is it changes it into a very wonderful positive spiral. And so, I can read this book. Even after 6 years of negative experience in the English classroom, you give them a graded reader at their level. Many people say, wow, this is the first time I went cover to cover and I read it without a dictionary. And they're like, wow, this is really cool. And they get more motivated. And they read a little bit more. And as they read a little bit more, they get a little bit more confident. As they read more and get more motivation and more confidence, their vocabulary, those core vocabulary words, they're all contained in those graded readers. So they develop those big gaps that they have in their knowledge of core vocabulary get addressed as well. So for me, it's the focus on extensive reading and listening and teaching of high frequency vocabulary. They go hand in hand, and they just really address some of the problems that are really prevalent in Japan, where I am.
How important is it to focus on extensive reading and vocabulary building as it relates to speaking output development?
Well, if you think of the receptive skills as like reading and listening, and the productive skills as speaking and writing. I mean, I would say that, if you want to be able to speak English better, if you're taking the same kind of approach, then what you need to do is students need to be exposed to comprehensible listening materials. And that's one of the reasons I've done so much work with English Central. This is not ER Central, this is now English Central. And English Central, the thing that really intrigued me about what they were doing and why I wanted to work with them is because what they've got about 10,000 authentic videos that basically, because of maybe advice that I gave them or whatnot, but they went the route of grading the difficulty of all of those videos from hardest to easy, from easiest to hardest, and then to using the contextualization that those authentic videos offer to sort of drive vocabulary learning of high frequency vocabulary. And so they also have really kind of cool voice recognition tools, and so it's sort of focusing on developing speaking skills in very much the way I sort of promote, which is through comprehensible input, which is lots of and when you talk about extensive reading or extensive listening, one of the rules that has to be comprehensible, it has to be at your level, but one of the other rules that many people forget is that it has to be interesting and relevant, right? So you can write a story at the 200 word level, and they're Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss is maybe at the 500 word level, but that's probably not relevant to a 35-year-old businessman. It's not going to be interesting or relevant at all. So not only does the material have to be graded, but it has to be relevant and interesting to the person's level. And I think that's what English Central has figured out, because it's got 10,000 videos, and they're like, funny American TV commercials and interviews with Angela Jolie and movie trailers for the Hollywood movies. And so they're taking funny TV shows like Monty Python from when I was a kid, and they're just taking, funny, interesting, quirky 3-minute bites of English and then mining it for language learning. So the students have the motivation to watch it because it's relevant and it's interesting. And then what we do is we create all these scaffolding tools to try and make difficult videos simpler for them so that it becomes I+1.
And talking from the technology point, what sort of mobile platforms or programs are you using for extensive reading or for other?
Well, I would say it's much less for mobile. I think the direction that a lot of people are going, including myself, is rather than building a separate software program for each device, which is time consuming, expensive, and a lot of updates are needed, is to work in HTML5, which if you build a web browser based experience that scales well to different devices, then you only have to build it once. And it works on your PC, but then it also works on your tablet, and it also works on your cell phones. And so that's sort of, I think right now we're spending a lot more time doing that direction first, because we're doing this on our own coin, so we don't have much money, and I think that building it once makes a lot more sense at this point. But app development, there is actually a lot that can be done. So I mean, if you've got a budget and you want a purpose-built app that gives this kind of a learning experience and this kind of learning stream, it's actually not that difficult to develop. But the problem is, once you develop for one platform, then you have to figure out what all the quirks are and fix it for the other platform. And of course, you have to develop for PCs. So you're building
plus the updates.
Yeah, plus the updates. Beyond what I can do.
So right now, you're focusing on HTML5.
Well, for most of my projects, and what I've done is when people, when a specific company or school or university or somebody approaches me and says, gee, Charlie, this is really interesting, but we want it on iPhone. And I've done that in the past. So I've built, iPhone applications for learning the academic word list or the general service list or learning English through video. When there's a need, I've actually built those things. But, when I'm just trying to figure out something new and I don't have a particular audience in mind, I tend to sort of the starting point being HTML5 because it gets out to more people until we figure out what people like or what's useful.
So from a crowdsourcing point of view, would you recommend that people build apps? And you mentioned the complications that are involved, but for sharing technology with other teachers or other students?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean. So do you mean like crowdsourcing and apps don't necessarily go together really well?
They don't. So the question is, would you recommend that if somebody wants to help out and build some sort of educational tool, would you recommend? Oh no,
I mean, well, if you're saying, if there is somebody out there who has the ability to build apps, and if they saw the extensive reading site we have, said, gee, I'd love to build an app for that and make it available for everybody for free. Of course, that would be very welcome. I mean, it's a crowdsourced website, and what we're trying to do is to get every possible tool we can think of that we can build, or every link that we can find, or every bit of content we can find, and put it up there so that everybody can benefit. And we've had a lot of people kick in their time, their talent, their content, their materials, and help us a lot. And even though the site is not very well known, we're already getting a lot of people with that attitude. And it would be wonderful, if that's what you're asking, it'd be wonderful if there are a few programmers out there who said, gee, this would be great, but I wish there was a dedicated app. I'd be willing to help. I mean, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
So, ER Central is your primary site right now for extensive reading.
Yes.
And that's er-central.com.
Yes.
And it's in beta right now. So
it's in beta, yeah.
That means you can access it.
You can access just about everything. There's a few things still hidden behind the wall, but I'd say about 70% of what we're building is out there now, and you can play with it. And we're presenting about it at the conferences, and we're just putting content up there as fast as we can. And we've actually got a lot of content that's not up on site yet because it's just the two of us for the most part. And as we get more people helping us, I think a lot more content will be flowing up there. But I think there's got to be close to 1,000 stories and probably 1,200 or more, listenings, I should say, up there, and activities and vocabulary lists and vocabulary learning tools. So hopefully it'll be, a vibrant, growing, community and growing amount of content that people can use.
I want to thank you for your time, Charlie, and thanks a lot for your
Absolutely.
profound help with extensive reading and vocabulary building. Thanks a lot.